Hey guys, this week we're talking about special snowflakes and generic characters. Let's get the ball rolling. All right, Chris here with Drop Dice. Today we're talking about the special snowflake and the generic character. Let's kind of start off with what the definitions, or at least I see the definitions as. Now, if you guys disagree with me, want to comment, add anything, please feel free to do so inside our comment section here. So basically, the idea of the special snowflake is a character that comes from such a fine-tuned background that it almost seems unlikely. For comic books, a character that I would consider a special snowflake is Batman. He comes from a background where he gets orphaned because his parents are shot. He's a millionaire. He goes around the world and studies martial arts, and then he comes back to Gotham and he's trying to clean up the streets, and he has an undefined amount of assets to be able to help him do this. That's kind of a special snowflake. I used the term GM fiat last week. They're almost like a player fiat to allow them to do whatever kind of nonsense that they want because it's justified by their background. For fantasy, I would say that Drizzt is a special snowflake. It's a drow who are generically evil, who goes to the surface world and repents for his actions, sort of, and runs around with two swords, and then has his panther that runs around with him. And if you read the books, you notice that the other characters fade to the background, and that character always succeeds at everything. That's kind of a special snowflake right there. I like characters with flaws, and that's just kind of my preference. In fact, some game systems, I've stopped using them because I thought characters succeeded too much. Not to say that I think characters should fail all the time, but I think that there should be a chance of failure. And I'm a big fan of Dungeon World because of the way it works inside that one, because basically if I don't feel like there's a reason for you to fail, I just tell you do it. And so I've taken that aspect and I've applied it to other games. If I tell you to roll a pickpocket check, that's because I think there should be a chance to fail that. If I don't tell you to do it, then chances are I'm just going to say you pickpocket him and you find 12 gold pieces and a golden key, because I needed you to find that golden key and it helps things. And that's kind of my stance on special snowflakes, is they tend to not fail, and I just don't really care for that. Now, the opposite end of the spectrum is, of course, the generic, I'm Joe the fighter and I swing a sword. Okay, Joe, what's your race? Human. Okay, what city did you come from? Port Town? Okay, what did you do before? I'm an adventurer. I've just been an adventurer. That's an interview with a player who has a generic character. They're painful, to be honest, both as a player and a GM. Sometimes it's funny if it's done kind of satirically, but then the character becomes something. Like, he started as a generic, I'm a fighter, I swing a sword, but then Joe evolves and he becomes like Joe of Greenwood, folk hero, and he becomes a person in the game. And that's fine to me, because not everybody should have a whole lot of interest before they start their adventuring career, to be honest. It's not like you got your sword from a dead dragon and carved a tooth for 300 years because you're an elf, and now you're an eldritch knight, or whatever the case may be. That's that special snowflake there. I think that generic characters, so long as they start and then evolve, have a very strong influence on what tabletop RPGs are about. Taking a person who's mundane and becoming more. My problem with the generic character is when it becomes that they are only generic, that they are about, the player, I should say, is about the math. For example, when you go online, you can find stuff like, what is the average amount of dice compared to a Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition Great Axe versus a Great Sword? and let's mix in if he's an orc and if he's a barbarian, which weapon does more damage. If you're going about it that way, your character's probably generic. Um, Not 100% of the time, but generally a lot of the times when you see people who are dwelling a lot on the math behind a system, their characters do tend to come off a little generic if they're newer. A lot of people who power game, not to say that that's a bad thing, do eventually figure out how to role play as well as power game. In fact, that's pretty much my table that I normally run with. They all know how to power game, and when they look at systems, they look at ways to specialize into something, which is what power gaming is specialization. Um, and that doesn't bother me, really, to be honest. It just means that I have to kind of increase challenges a little bit, but it allows them special moments where they feel like they've done awesome because they get to know that, they they hit this dragon so hard that they broke its neck because they just did so much damage in one stroke that I have to describe it something like that. Um, yeah, that's basically what I'm getting at is crunching the numbers and focusing on only the numbers is where generic characters come in for me. Joe, our guy who swings a sword, he I wouldn't keep him at my table for very long. I usually give people about 2 to 3 games to feel out their character because I know that that's how I am. I usually build a character. I have a generic idea of how I'm going to role play. My role playing will be a little light for the first couple games, but after I kind of get in the swing of it, it becomes role playing for me. So long as it's kind of a regular schedule. Once we start getting in off schedules, it starts to feel a little weird coming back to a game after like 4 weeks of not playing, but still. Um, so both of these styles can be detrimental to both players and GMs. Um, I'm curious if first off, if you had a preference, which one would you go for? And as much as I hate to say it, I would almost rather a person have the generic character because I can try and teach and sculpt them to become more of the RP side of things. To me, the special snowflake tends to hurt the group because they do take the spotlight a lot. And that's just kind of my personal preference. Uh, when I start running games online and having those shown, you'll probably see that I'm going to ask people no special snowflakes because generally I don't like to have more than one at the table. There is a special type of special snowflake that is almost satirical, and I do like that one. I'm guilty of making one of these, a monk for Pathfinder who, instead of being, I'm an orphan, I come from a super dark background, and I'm awesome, and I've got this belt that comes from blah, 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 blah. My background is my mother was a whore, and she had 8 illegitimate children. I just happened to be one of them. She couldn't afford to keep me, so she turned me over to a monastery in the local region. I grew up at the monastery along with one of my brothers. He stayed and became a monk of the temple. I left for my own adventure. And when you become an adult within this temple, you're allowed to choose your name. So I chose my name as Regret, which was kind of a funny poke at the fact that his mother regretted having him. Well, the best part about the story is you would think that I could take that and do like, oh, I'm a dark brooding character. My mother never loved me. He was actually instead very loving to his brothers and sisters, and he almost felt pity on his mother. Um, and then I added stuff in the background to make it a little bit more funny. Like his 3 youngest brothers were Tom, Dick, and Harry. He had a strong attachment to his sister, his immediately younger sister, um, because he, even while in the temple, he would sneak out and try and protect her, and she ended up getting wrapped up in the mom's business as well. And so he has this big family that the GM gets to kind of play with and put in odd situations so that Regret can move forward through the story and kind of explore this. And because he was made with kind of a laughter of tone inside his creation, I think it actually didn't hurt the game that much because I don't like to keep the spotlight for too terribly long in a game. So for me, I think it was kind of nice because it did require me to use the spotlight a little bit more than I normally do. Um, and so playing that kind of character actually allowed me to role play a little bit more of an aspect, and a lot of my guys who I normally play with actually really liked having Regret at the table because it was kind of silly to have this monk there that was not a ninja, but sort of a ninja. Um, and I think that if you do a special snowflake that way, it totally works. But that's something that you need to work with your GM for, so that they understand that I'm doing it this way, but I want them to have a lot of RP value, not just a reason for me to have this cool item at the beginning. All right, so that's pretty much what I have for this week. Unfortunately, there wasn't like a huge hot topic issue this week, so I figured we'd talk about something that I kind of think about every once in a while. Um, so hopefully by next week we'll have a new kind of broad aspect topic that's kind of come up in the community. Other than that, I'll see you at the gaming table.